5, 4, 3. Oh, damn it. We're live.
There you go.
Hello and welcome to Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, special interview Jangles post-debate edition.
Yeah, like
hang on for just a second, actually. Somehow my voice is being fed back to me, and yep, that's why. I had the actual YouTube thing open on another screen.
Me too. Yeah, same deal. I was like waiting for it to start so I can mute it. Only professionalism from us.
We are so good at this. This is bigger than Chapo Trap House, and this used to be on the radio, but then editing is hard. In fact, people have asked me. I finished the debate with Destiny last week, and people have asked me. They said, "Why don't you put out more short clips of it?" I said, "Because editing is hard." And time-consuming, and I am lazy. So, Jangles, you just finished I think the best way to put it is incredibly frustrating debate with Tjump on the subject of the super straight movement. So, why don't you fill in the audience on this, just in case they didn't see the debate? The link is in the description if you guys haven't seen it. But what were your overall thoughts on it?
So just in case anyone in the audience isn't familiar, the super straight movement was basically a TikTok meme that found its way to 4chan, as best as anyone can tell. Basically saying that if you don't see trans women as women or trans men as men, if you don't see them that way, you can just declare that you have a new sexuality, and that sexuality is super straight, and therefore you are completely free and exempt from all criticism. You cannot be transphobic because that's just your sexuality. That was the whole meme behind it. It was as I described it in the debate, I identify as an attack helicopter joke in its 875th iteration. Mm-hmm. And so I debated Tjump on the topic, and it was interesting. It was an interesting experience because I'm not unknown in the modern day debate audience. They did not like me, and it was one of those, like, usually, I don't know, that's kind of what I want to talk about today, like when the audience really, or at least the chat, because the chat and the audience aren't necessarily synonymous. There's a Venn diagram there, or not a Venn diagram, but like that's a portion of the audience, right? So that's kind of what I was hoping to talk about today. Like, when the chat hates you, is that a sign that you did bad?
I think it's a sign that you did really well when the chat hates you. Like, one of the things you got to understand about modern day debate is, and I've said this before to a number of great debaters, Ben Burgess and several other people, the chat in modern day debate is a trash fire. And it is a trash fire for the most part because of the way modern day debate formed. Because the core kind of audience, or at least the very engaged audience of modern day debate, comes from three groups: creationists, creationists, flat earthers, and new atheists. And all three of those communities are inherently reactionary. And that's just because that was all the content they were putting out before we lefties started to get involved, which was a lot of fun. I'm glad. And I think that we're raising the level of discourse, but you still got to deal with that. There were also Nazis for a while, though. I think they've finally chilled out and left because they realized they weren't going to be able to use it to recruit.
Which is good. Good on modern day debates.
Yeah. It was the alt-right had high hopes for re-infiltrating YouTube after most of them got banned. And then after I beat the crap out of JF Garape in my debate against him, and when Eric Stryker and James Alsup came in and then found themselves faced with Vosh and Destiny as a tag team, I think they kind of realized, like, okay, this isn't going to work. We're not going to be able to use this to trick 13-year-olds into becoming Nazis.
Which is a good showing. Like, it is. I don't think we should concede grounds when it's obvious that we're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's always a risk. You can never fully predict how well you're going to do in a debate. But I like to think that our ideas are good, and that's why we have them, and they've been well thought out. And if we can substantiate them, and as long as you have some sort of skill in rhetoric, don't concede ground like that. I think that's you're not. When you don't engage in debate, you're actually not engaging in debate. That's part of the debate. Part of the debate is they're too scared of our ideas. They are so scared because they know that we're right. That's why they don't want to talk to us about this stuff. And oftentimes it is like transparently stupid, but other times, and in a large portion of a large portion of the population will see that as like, oh, wait, why are they scared to debate? If it's so obviously, if their ideas are so obviously bad, why are they afraid to step into the ring? I'm putting it more like internet debates are not that grandiose, I know, but it's
well, no, I mean it is important to see that, and I feel like the marketplace of ideas is a problematic concept for a lot of reasons, and the alt-right, by infiltrating like large platforms, can attract the dumber people from the audience to their banner, but also like, again, a lot of the time, and especially like when some of the nastier figures have been on the channel, they've been more famous than the people they were debating. For instance, Milo Yiannopoulos, when you crushed him, he essentially platformed you, not because he has a huge audience anymore, but because people will tune in to watch him get obliterated.
The name recognition was there, like, so.
Yeah. That was so cool. That excellent debate. So was this your first time locking horns with Tjump? I've debated him twice before, but
this was my first time.
Yeah, and how? So to preface this, by the way, I like Tjump personally. The times that we've talked, he can be an incredibly frustrating human being to interact with. But like, how did you? And this debate in particular had me like tearing out my hair. And he and I went back and forth for like 2 days in Messenger, in the Messenger app after it. I'm just like, oh, how are you this dense? But like, what was your feeling with debating him? And like, yeah. So overall, like, what was your impression of him as an interlocutor and as an opponent?
So from what I've gathered from obviously debating him, but also from what I've been hearing from like other people who debated him, other people who are more familiar with him, is that rhetoric is his skill set. That is what he is most known for. Like, that's why he's done so many like disparate topics. It's because it doesn't really matter if he's an expert on any of those topics. It's because he styles himself as someone who can, kind of on the fly engage in that style of rhetoric with almost anything. And so I thought this was a really good test of like, I have a lot of weaknesses, and one of them I think is like the ability to, I don't know, I think rhetoric might be one of them in certain points. So I thought this was a really good test, like a good, like, let's go into this. He's like the fallacy bro.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's like day one. That's like you passed rhetoric 101 and you've learned all the fallacies. And that's something he likes to throw out a lot. And that can have iffy, that can swing, and sometimes it hits with the audience and sometimes it misses. But it was really interesting hearing him throwing out like, oh, that's a false equivocation fallacy or something along those effects. So it was really interesting hearing him trying to like pull that stuff out and me trying to recognize like, wait a second, no, that's not correct. You're not using that fallacy.
Yeah. He's frequently, I will say he is frequently wrong when it comes to the fallacies. He was in the IM conversation we had, he kept saying that the argument that I was making was an ad hominem, and I had to keep explaining to him, no, ad hominem is a fallacy of relevance. So if a particular characteristic is actually relevant to the discussion, but it happens to be the characteristic of a person, it is not ad hominem. The people keep getting confused with ad hominem because they start to think either you can never bring up a person or their conduct or whatever, or they think it's like some sort of rule of politeness that you can't be mean in a debate to a person personally. And that has nothing to do with like the ad hominem fallacy. So yeah, he's frequently wrong about that. And he tended to bring up the genetic fallacy a lot. And I wanted to look that up again beforehand because I always get them a little confused in my head, but I felt like his calls of the genetic fallacy were wrong. Did you have a chance to check that out after the debate?
From what I understand, the genetic fallacy is that an argument is wrong because it's coming from a source that's, anyone involved would agree is bad. Like if a Nazi makes an argument, that argument isn't necessarily bad because the Nazi made it. You have to actually investigate the argument. I mean, you can call the Nazi a Nazi, but the argument itself should stand alone from them. But I don't feel like he's using that correctly. Like if one of the primary, in this case, there might be some validity to it on its own if you look at it philosophically, but if you looked at it practically and look at all the players involved in the super straight movement, it's not just that transphobes latched onto the argument, it's that every single
I mean, it was workshopped on 4chan.
Yeah, it was workshopped on 4chan for the exact purpose. The stated purpose in the original TikTok video was like, no, I'm not being serious. I'm just using this as a meme to get out of any sort of criticism. That's not genetic fallacy. That's how people engage with a super straight topic.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would legitimately say, no, I'm super straight. Like, that's my sexuality. I don't think, like, no one's engaging with that topic seriously. They're using it as like a Pastafarian, like, flying spaghetti monster type meme to point out perceived hypocrisies in the other side. So, yeah, it's not genetic fallacy. It's accurate identification of where this came from and what's being used for.
Absolutely. By the way, so if anybody is wondering where I'm coming from on this, on the side of this super straight thing, this is my friend actually sent me this shirt. This is the most radical shirt that I own for his band, Dog Park Dissidents, which are a queercore, queercore punk band run by furries.
Look at the artwork.
Yeah. My wife was looking at it and she's like, that's extreme. And I'm like, yeah, I'll only wear it on certain days.
Digging it, yeah.
So,
I'm a little concerned that I might.
You should check them out, by the way. They're a great band.
So I'm a little concerned that I might know the artist. It looks like I'm familiar enough with enough 30 artists where I can make a solid guess as to where that came from.
I hope you know the artist. That would be perfect. This is really funny for me, actually, because, like, if you'd come up to me in high school, like high school Brent, 18 years old, and like you told me I'm super straight, Brent, I would just look at you and be like, no, you're not. And I'd probably assume you were some kind of gay for like the rest of the year. Do you feel like, and you did a great job, like in the debate of making the connection between homophobia and transphobia, because it does seem like all of the arguments from like 2005 that were being made against gay marriage and against gay people in general. I don't hate, I don't hate gay people. I hate the sin or whatever. Like, it seems like those are just being repeated yet again, this time with regard to trans people. Is that a fair reading on this?
It's something. Well, there's a reading that I don't think I did. I actually don't think I did a great job pointing out the parallels between transphobia and homophobia. I wish we touched on it very slightly in the debate, but I feel like there's more of a point that could be made. Obviously, it's hard to like control the conversation at mid debate, but I guess I can try to make some of the arguments that I had planned to make if they were brought up. So I think a lot of the visceral reaction is like the entire like core of like the gay and or trans panic defense is like if your identity as a heterosexual person was questioned, it would be like such a blow, such a mind-boggling like a blow to your own identity and a negative connotation that's you're justified in engaging in violence. So I think a lot of it is like and this is generalizing a little bit even, but I think a lot of straight people like are horrified by the idea that they could be perceived as anything other than straight. And obviously this is a broad generalization and people are getting better. But I think it's still worth looking about. I think it's still worth considering, and that is not absent in the gay community. Like for example, a lot of like, especially people who are first coming out, they want to make a show, make a show out of like, I think, vaginas, those are gross, ladies, get them away from me, like, but. I think that is played up a little bit, but also I do think it's borrowing from the script that we're supposed to have. It's not that we're attracted to one gender or another. We're not only attracted, we're disgusted by our, the gender we're not attracted to. It's not like, oh, I like this. Yeah, that's okay. It's, oh, I really like this, which means like this. No, that's terrifying. No, ew, get it away from me. And we play that up a little bit in like the gay community. But I think that comes from the straight community. I think any kind of implication that if you were attracted to somebody, that's part of your sexuality. And I think the hit to your own self-identity is by far like the most salient factor in why people have this like visceral reaction.
Why Jim Carrey freaks out when he finds out that he slept with a trans woman or kissed a trans woman or something in that movie. Yeah.
And this is not to downplay like people's identities. Like if you have an identity and something threatens it, there's nothing inherently wrong with like wanting to uphold that identity and like questioning and being like a little bit taken aback by anything that questions it. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's only like, why?
As a Buddhist, I might argue that there is something inherently wrong with that because the self does not exist, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say in a regular non-Buddhistic sense, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having an identity and being disturbed when your identity gets threatened, I would say.
What is the sign like if you are of a default identity, like your identity is like you're as aware of your own identity as a fish is swimming in water or something to that effect?
Oh yeah.
Like for example, homosexual was coined before heterosexual, and so like heterosexual was coined like to distinguish itself from homosexual in that
much the way cis was coined to distinguish itself from trans.
Yeah, same way, which is why a lot of people like reject the term cis, like they used to reject the term straight, because in doing so they're acknowledging the legitimacy of the categorization that they don't agree with. So but a lot of people are still like very, very baked into this idea that me being a man or a woman, like this is an important part of your identity. And it is, it absolutely can be, but and acknowledging that is great. But the way a lot of people do it is instead of acknowledging that they do identify with this, they say, no, this isn't an identity that I have. I'm just stating the facts. You all are off in this fantasy land where you've invented this identity. You've invented this gender that has nothing to do with any sort of reality. I'm just acknowledging reality. And like, dude, it kind of sounds like this identity is an important part of like your makeup. Like, so it kind of sounds like you're invested into this and this is important to you, which is fine, but just acknowledge that you're not.
Yeah. No, I know what I feel what you're talking about here, because oftentimes people will, I would assume if someone does have, if someone's ability to love is greater than what they realize and they restrict that specifically just because of social convention, what happens is they get to the end of their life and they have diminished themselves and diminished their life for bullshit reasons because they want to fit in. So I can see like that kind of panic and fear setting into certain people. And, then you get stuff like, and you very well pointed out, like when someone tried to say that the super straights are the most marginalized category, like you pointed out, like, no, actually, gay people, the government was laughing about gay people dying, during the AIDS crisis. And then you also pointed out the super straight defense, that if you have sex with someone and you find out they're super straight, you can get off on an insanity plea.
Now, I don't know the person who posted that. If I was going to make a post that was a joke, it might be something similar to that. But based on the other questions that I got in the chat, I can't say for certain that was a joke. So
yeah. Well, Poe's law. You can never tell parody from an honest expression of extremism. By the way, and I wanted to bring this up because you talked about the flag and the colors for a little bit. And I don't know. I run in anarchist circles. So the second this super straight thing came out, like the mutualists that I know were furious because the mutualist anarchist flag is black and orange.
Yeah.
And so like half people started sharing the meme in like the discussion groups, and everybody's like, wait, what is everybody mad about at the mutualists? What's happening? And then quickly going,
I'm sorry, I called your flag ugly.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It is ugly. It's really ugly. I'm sorry, mutualists. And also stop being mutualist because nobody likes the fence sitter. So, yeah, so Tjump is very good at rhetoric. He's very pithy with things, and he can be an absolute brick wall when it comes to trying to actually converse with him. Occasionally you can break through that wall. I think, like, for instance, when I debated him on Black Lives Matter, it started out really badly, and I think I actually got a little more emotional towards the beginning of the debate than I had otherwise, but that was also just, that was frustrating. But then as the debate continued, we got a chance to communicate a bit more. It seemed to me, both based on the debate and the conversation that I had, one of the things that he's really, really worried about is people being called transphobic. Mm-hmm. And more than that, people being fired for being transphobic, of which I haven't heard of any of that instances happening. There was the one woman in England who was
What's her name?
like wildly transphobic and basically just was declined to be rehired as a contractor. And then she spun that into some sort of publicity campaign that J.K. Rowling retweeted. But other than that, like, is there like a rash of people being fired for being transphobic? I've never heard of
the way they always frame it is, I was fired for saying that men are men and women are women. That's what I was fired for. Everybody wants to say that while they're defending. No one wants to like get into the details. So, for example, there was this story that came out, was picked up by all of the right-wing news sites that you would think, the post-millennial and all that fun stuff. And then an identical story has come out really recently where like this father was only trying to save his son from being like forced into taking these puberty blockers and being forced to dress up as a girl. He was just trying to save her from all of that. And when you actually look into the story, no, this like no, like and the kid and everything, like, no, when the kid was with the father, he wanted to be called by male pronouns. He wanted to be referred to as a boy. And when you found out, it's because the father was like threatening the kid, like saying like, no, you're not a girl. Don't you dare say that stuff in my house. And like the mother was like this, like, my kids telling me like what they want to do. I just want to like do what's best for my child. So it's that really easy reframing that speaks really well to an audience that's already receptive to hear it. People love being perceived as like, I don't want to say as victims because that's like a right-wing talking point, but I don't know. There's a certain truth that like this like perception that you are attacked can be a powerful rhetorical tool because it's playing off that like empathetic response that humans have. That's why almost every single reactionary movement tries to refocus as them being attacked. We're not allowed to speak our truth on social media. What's your truth? Don't worry about it. We're not allowed to speak our truth.
Well, I'm only trying from personal experience. So on my second Snow White Zombie Kickstarter campaign, I would come up with sporadic updates and stuff, and I would see how many people liked it and commented and shared it and everything. And I was running Facebook ads, and I ran a Facebook ad featuring a cover that I had created based on this famous, it was an alternate cover based on the famously most censored comic book cover of all time, which was like this very tame thing from like Crime Suspense Stories number 22 in 1951. And it was like, it was like kind of a guy standing there holding a severed woman's head with an axe and drawn in like a very 1950s style. And so I basically had my characters juxtaposed with it because it also coincided with a plot point in the second and third comic.
Which is a good comic, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Yeah. And so like what wound up happening was that like Facebook refused to run the ad. And like I kept like being like, run the ad, and they're like, no, it's blood and gore. We can't have this. And I'm just like, okay, you're censoring a joke about the most famously censored comic of all time. So I put out an ad that was like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg won't let you see this, and put like a picture of Mark going, nope, and like censored over the face, and put out an update saying like, we're being censored by Facebook. And it was mainly just a joke because I thought it was a funny situation. That got more shares and more engagement than any other update I did. And honestly, people like Milo Yiannopoulos, people like Richard Spencer have been using this as a marketing tactic. And it's been a marketing tactic that's well known for like since we were kids. I mean, that's do you remember when Mortal Kombat first came out and there were like supposedly mothers that wanted to ban it and everything?
Look at these gray hairs. Yes, of course I do.
Yeah, yeah, you and me both. And
did it work? Well, that's also the thing. Like that.
Not only did it not work, it was a product of PR people working for Mortal Kombat to advertise Mortal Kombat.
There's a reason people do it. If you play up like no one wants you to see this, like this one weird trick that no doctor wants you to see, or something like that, it builds curiosity. Like, wait, what ideas aren't I being told? I'm curious. I want to hear ideas. Like, it's a very good marketing tactic for anybody, and it's very like duplicitously used in all sorts of circumstances. It's not in itself a bad thing. There are legitimate instances of like people getting censored
Yeah.
off of platforms when their ideas were not meant to be harmful. Like especially like left-wing ideas, like they're not meant to be harmful, but they're going against a certain status quo that is being perceived as a threat.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like threatening the status quo is also not in and of itself a good thing. Like you can threaten the status quo in many harmful ways, and so, but it's a very good tactic to like bring out people's empathy and their curiosity. Like, oh, that sucks. You're like not even allowed to like say your opinions online. That really sucks. What are your opinions? Let me hear. So there's a reason it's adopted.
Yeah. Now you had, and I want to bring this out just partially because I am very well known for putting a lot of effort into my opening statements on on Modern Day Debate. God, I'm calling it MDD now. So your opening statement, I felt in this was incredibly strong. And it feels like you're doing a good job of channeling both Cody Johnston and Destiny, and also putting your own Jangles Sciencelad spin on it. So like, how long did that opening statement take you to write? And did you practice it beforehand, or were you just reading cold?
Well, so I narrate audiobooks as like a side gig. So I'm decent at not cold reading, but I'm decent at reading off the cuff. It is quite different than speaking normally, than speaking off the cuff. That's just not one of my strengths. Like if I have to talk for 10 minutes at a time, it's just not something that I'm good at. And I recognize that. And I know there's a certain part of the audience who doesn't like when you read off a script. And I'm just going to take that L because I think I'm a decent writer. I wear my influences on my sleeve. I take no shame whatsoever in like acknowledging that I take influences from Cody Johnston. I take them from Destiny. I take them a little bit from Vosh, but that's basically just taking it from Destiny again. I take influences from H. Balmer guy philosophy too. I take all those influences, and just by the nature of like, I'm an okay writer, so there's going to be some of my own flourishes there.
As a pro, you're definitely not bad. So
well, thank you.
Yeah.
So opening, it's more 90% of my writing process, and I'm sure that if there are any writers, you might agree with this, is 90% of the process is staring at that blank page and just getting really mad that it's still blank. That's 90% of the writing process, is staring at a blank page and getting more and more frustrated. Mm-hmm. The actual writing probably took maybe 30 minutes, but the time before that, like, I'm not going to count that. Oh, no, I just woke up one day, decided to write this stuff. No, it was staring at a blank page for a long time and getting mad.
Well, we can definitely see the audiobooks because, like, I'm a theater professional, and in my opinion, I think your reading off of a script is better than mine. Now, granted, usually I have finished writing that script maybe 5 minutes before we need to start. But like, do you have a theatrical background? Is that how you got into doing the audiobooks, or is that why you have such a good audio setup?
The reason I have a good audio setup is because if you are focusing on buying gear and getting better things, you don't have to focus on making stuff. You think, well, maybe if I just get a slightly better microphone, that'll improve everything. That's going to be the answer. The reason I'm not blowing up right now is because my camera's not good enough, so I just need to shop for some new cameras. No, that's kind of the reason. And then the audiobook was almost like a post hoc justification to my husband as to, okay, no, I know, I just spent a lot of money that we really don't have on microphones, so I'm gonna make audiobooks. Yeah, I'm gonna make audiobooks. See, it wasn't a waste. But as far as like theatrical backgrounds, not really.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other than I was in band. Like, I played music. I don't know if there's any carryover whatsoever, but
I would. So I personally would not have been surprised if you had a theatrical background. So kudos. I would say you're very naturally talented in that area, and it's a damn good thing you didn't pursue theater because there's no money whatsoever in theater. It's really funny, because I went to, I got to New York and I was having some early success as a playwright, and I was like, yeah, okay, I know everybody says there's no money in this, but I'm sure I can find. No, there's not any money in this. So, all right. What I would say overall, where do you think you were the strongest in the debate, and where do you think you could have possibly done better?
Strongest might have been in the opening just because I happened to give a comparison that Tjump gave. So Tjump went before me. He gave this Pastafarianism comparison to the super straight movement, and then I had written that beforehand. So that happened to be a part of my opening statement. I think that comes across as stronger than it really is. I called it. Or I'm doing this off the fly. I think that was just more fortuitous for me. So I can't think that came across as decently strong. I think towards the Q&A section where hopefully I either came across as insufferable as this whiny loser, or I came across as funny, depending on that. Where I could have done better, and based on the feedback that I've got, I didn't push back enough on a lot of well, no, when someone says a trans woman isn't a real woman, that's not transphobic. That's just stating biological facts.
Yeah.
I could have pushed back a little bit harder on that, but it's always hard to say, it's always hard for the debaters know when you should really, really hone down and focus on stuff, because that can also bite you in the rear end if you're only focusing on this one thing that someone says. Sometimes that's legitimate, but also sometimes they can make you come across as oh, you're just super triggered by this one event. And I'm saying triggered in the way that people in online debate spheres use it. It has a medical use. There's a legitimate meaning behind the word. I know. I wish it wasn't used that way, but that's kind of the terminology.
But that's how people talk, especially people who seem to agree with Tjump. So, and I don't know why he's been adopting all of this alt-right stuff lately. It's really frustrating to watch.
It's not all right. Black Pigeon Speaks, Sargon of Cotton, Blair White, all those are lefties. They're progressives and liberals.
Yeah. We had Black Pigeon Speaks in particular, I debated Sargon. And I've watched a little bit of Blair White's content, as infuriating and ridiculous as it is. But Black Pigeon Speaks, if you go back and you watch Sean's video on him and how he thinks women destroy civilizations, and just listen to the way that Black Pigeon Speaks says the phrase, allowing women to fuck freely, and to hear just the rage and hatred in his voice in just that one moment, that really tells you all you need to know about that guy. The guy who apparently wants to deploy the police to make sure that women only have sex with the people he wants.
Yeah, that would be enough. And then you also have the rest of his content adding to it. So this is this is a far right person.
Yeah.
If you don't want to use the word Nazi, that's fine. He's far right. There's no.
Yeah. He's a fascist of one stripe or the other. And for Tjump to claim, I don't know if it was out of ignorance or whatever, but for Tjump to just the simple fact that he's listening to that guy and thinking of him as a expert on the subject is honestly really troubling to me, because if you're soaking your brain in that shit, I don't care how smart you are, that is a death cult.
That's another way that I can do better in debates going in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not. Winning a debate is very, very, very subjective. It doesn't matter how much you think you crush. It's never going to be a unanimous decision. And there are debates that I thought I did enormously well in. There's no possible way I could have done better, where I've gotten a lot of negative feedback. And then there are debates where I thought I was phoning it in. I thought I was hanging on by a thread that people said I crushed in. I'm a terrible judge of how I'm doing during a debate. But something that has repeatedly come up and it's something that. So, for example, I've gone to. Do you know the Milwaukee MythCon guys?
Yeah, I'm familiar. I'm familiar with MythCon. Did you do a debate at MythCon?
Not MythCon, but the same organizers arranged something called the Better Discourse Conference, and I went to it last year, and I will be going to it again this year, and that is a right-wing audience. And my goal here is not to win a debate, because one, I'm not going to. You're not going to win against this hostile audience. What you should do is ingratiate yourself just a little bit to that audience, and that can sound duplicitous, that can sound really gross to some people, but the ultimate goal, if you are an activist of any sort, is to change minds. It's not to play to your side. It's not to make. There is a certain portion of it that says that, oh, you need to make your side feel good, and that's absolutely awesome. And there is a certain portion that is you need to counter evidence from the other side. That's also awesome. But where the biggest bang for your buck is going to be is that that portion in the middle who is open, they have their minds open. And if you are likable enough, if your arguments are good, if you don't make them feel too defensive, you can actually reach out to them. And that's something that I feel like I could do a better job at in a lot of my debates. I'm okay at it here and there, but it's something that I think a lot of us on in this like debating sphere need to have a better job at. That's why streamers oftentimes are not great at activist debating, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the goal is never to convince the other side. The goal is to come across as strong to your audience. And there's not anything inherently wrong with that as long as we realize like where its utilities are limited.
Yeah. Well, this is actually really interesting because I started as an activist before I started streaming, and I was an artist before both of those things. And like, so first, I was also someone who started out as very right-wing. And then, as I watched, the Iraq War and capitalism melt down, I gradually moved very far to the left, where now I'm to the left of, I think Destiny described me as far to the left of most people he's debated. And that's probably correct. Though I don't identify myself with the left because I don't want team bias to come into my head and inform my opinions. I want to remain independent. So I'll throw the left under a bus if I think they're wrong. but I tend to agree with the left much more these days because, have you seen the right wing?
Yeah. There's something to that. Like sometimes you can't be an expert on everything. Like no one can know a lot about everything. And so sometimes it's just like, well, here is a side, here is a position that I tend to agree with on what I have researched. And so I'm going to take that as the default position going forward. There's something to be had of that. There's nothing morally wrong with that for a lot of people. But it can start to manifest itself in those post hoc rationalizations is what does my side think? They think this about this topic that I know nothing about. Okay, cool. All right. That's my motivated reasoning going forward. That's my position. And it's not, I'm not finding reasons as to why I believe this. I'm believing something and then finding reasons to believe it. So it's wrong. It's just kind of how we work.
Yeah. Well, to a certain extent, I think that's partially what Tjump has been doing. It's one of the reasons, by the way, why intelligent people are often recruited into cults. Because intelligent people can come up with some very smart reasons to believe some very, very stupid things. Yeah. So like one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and this was an area that I'm going to hit you with some criticism here.
Do it.
And I feel that you ceded the ground that there are biological men and biological women to him when in fact that is not the case. Gender is a social construct. Gender, the way I like to explain it is that gender is your body parts look like this, therefore you should. The gender is that therefore you should. It's the description of the social role that someone who looks like you visually should inhabit within the society. I've got a number of friends who are biologists, and they've pointed out, essentially that biological sex, as we understand it, one, it's not gender, and two, it kind of doesn't exist. It's more of a spectrum where you've got male and female, not men and women, but male and female at two ends, two limits, and then everyone falls somewhere between those two. The obvious kind of George Carlin explanation is why do you think men have nipples? We're more on the mass.
I can answer that question, but probably not in a TOS friendly way.
Okay, but then we'll talk about it afterwards.
There you go. But a lot of people engage in what that post hoc rationalization of what I call like binary seeking behavior. It's like, well, what is the thing in biology that says there are only two sexes? And so people will like search and search and search. All right, it's genitals. Wait a second. Wait, no, there are people with like a large variation. Chromosomes. That's chromosomes. Wait, there's XX and XY. Wait, there's more. Oh, wait, what? Yeah, gametes. No, there's only two types of gametes, and that's how you determine biological sex. That means there's only two because we have large immobile gametes and small mobile gametes. That means that's the thing that we need. But there's a certain amount of ground that I'm willing to concede in certain environments. So
Mhm.
when someone says that there's biological sex, I think there's enough of a colloquial sense of what that means to at least adopt that framework and try to say where it's wrong. But because it's a much more complicated conversation to say
Yeah,
that, like,
which
okay,
is a good point.
when you get to the point where like you're talking about like gametes. This is
Mhm.
functionally useless and all 100% of your interactions in day-to-day life. The only exceptions are like biologists, not even just biologists, but specifically someone who is specializing in reproductive biology. So I think definitions can give us utility. And for a reproductive biologist in their field to say like, no, there are two sexes in my field for certain organisms. And they're defined by gametes because that's what gives me utility in my field of reproduction. I think to me, there's nothing wrong with that because in that very specific instance, that's where those definitions are going to have the most utility. The problem is when you prioritized and, if I dare say it, privilege that definition in situations and contexts where it doesn't have any utility whatsoever, which would be in like social interactions. Like we
Yeah.
can't see gametes, we can't see chromosomes, we can only see secondary sex characteristics as well as like someone's presentation.
Mhm.
And those things are biological to a large extent, like your vocal range that had, there are physical limitations to that, your ability to grow body hair, your ability to grow muscle mass in a lot of circumstances, those are biologically determined to a certain extent. But it's
Yeah.
all like, how do you engage with that environment? To what extent do you pursue your biological proclivities? That's probably not the right word, but it's the only, but I'm
Yeah.
done. So when we talk about like this subject, there's a certain amount. In this case, I know Tjump is not super familiar with trans topics. I clarified it multiple times, and so it's like, okay, if I get bogged down in explaining this stuff, it might not be super productive. It might make me come across as, I don't know.
Overeducated or crazy or all that kind of thing. I think you're
Which
right.
which are could be the same thing, overeducated and crazy. Like for someone who's just not familiar with the research, those two things could be synonymous. If you're, yeah. So
Mhm. No, I think you are right about that. Though also the problem is that I also feel like one of the major reasons why one of the things that's good about these debates is I want them to affect, like when I go into a debate, I don't just think about the debate itself and the audience. I think about the dialectic, and I think about how I can influence the world and make sure that we have more accurate information than we otherwise did before. Like, for instance, good example being the debate I just recently did with Destiny, which I'm probably not going to stop bragging about, except for 6 months. But like one
I
of the
watched that
critics.
debate driving home, so
Oh, you did?
it was interesting. Well, I'd listen to it. I did
Well,
not watch a debate while
listeners
driving.
didn't
That would
watch
be
it.
dangerous.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the debate I did with Destiny, one of the criticisms that I've received for it is that I let Destiny put me on the back foot because the debate was ostensibly about his moral system, but then I was answering hypotheticals and going into it. And I agree that in the context of just that one debate with Destiny, um, I allowed myself to come across as a little weaker than I could have rhetorically. But also, one, I was fascinated by the conversation, and two, it was very important for me to get certain ideas out into the world that I know will be then heard and replicated. Specifically, I wanted to get a lot of my Buddhist philosophy out, particularly when it came to dealing with his idea of centering the self and fulfilling experience at the center of any moral system, which I think is a huge problem. So I'm okay with taking a hit within a individual debate if more people learn about that particular way of looking at the world, and particular philosophy. And maybe that's just me justifying it. But
So any criticism you get from a debate, you always have to like put it in the context of like, what are people expecting from debates? There's a huge contingent of people who say that like your job in a debate is to make the other side look as bad as possible and for you to look as strong as possible. This is a sports game in which you need to score more points in order to win. And I don't think that is a necessarily wrong way to look at debates.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be very useful. If you can make Nazis look stupid and weak and ineffective, I think that's enormously useful to do that.
Propaganda value of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other side, and like people, the side that everyone says that they're on, but they're not really, is like, I just want to see the most honest and strongest version of arguments, and I want to see which one comes out on top. Everyone says that they're on that, but everyone
Nobody
already
is on that side.
Yeah, no one's on that side, including me. Hey, none of this is criticism that I'm levying at other people that wouldn't apply to myself as well. When I watch a debate between someone who's on my side and someone who's not, I'm not engaging in open, like, I don't have the most open mind in the world. I want to see my side win. Now, and some utility I've gotten from that experience, I've seen people on my side who've done incredibly poorly, and that is like a big blow. Like, oof, this looks so bad for us. Like, oh no. And I've taken that experience and also like applied it to the other side as well, to say that, like, hey, if I can make them think that way, that's a good thing. But there's also some utility in, like, I've also gotten messages based on like someone like the most extreme debates I've ever had, where someone has like posted a message like, hey, you know what? You at least see more people on your side. And you can turn that into a grift very easily. But there is a way to utilize it and say, hey, I seem reasonable. That's cool. I genuinely believe everything that I say. And if you thought I came across as reasonable, I don't know. Maybe there's that opens up a door that wasn't open before.
Well, this is really important because, again, as someone who has been persuaded by online debate, and I was persuaded in the sense that, like, one of the reasons I'm an anarchist today is that I encountered anarchism online and decided, as a red-blooded American male, this can't be a thing, and I proceeded to argue against it. And I realized about halfway through the long, drawn-out, truncated arguments that I was having, I didn't understand what the fuck I was talking about. And I would have to learn about it in order to win the argument. So I went back, I learned about anarchism, I went back, I won the argument. And then like 6 months later, I was like, shit, he was right the whole time. Yeah. And and it wasn't just the argument, it wasn't just having the information, but it was also specific things that happened in my life that brought me into the frame of mind where I could see the truth in the arguments. And that's why I don't think it's a problem that you pissed off the chat. In fact, I think oftentimes if you really piss off the chat, it means you're doing really well. Ben Burgess mentioned that whenever he hears a really solid argument, especially early in the process of listening to debates, he doesn't, if that argument comes from the other side, he doesn't go, that was a really good argument, or he didn't when he was younger. He would just get angry. So if you're really stirring up that bee's nest that is the modern day debate chat audience, it's probably because you're bringing up cognitive dissonance in their mind and they're trying to excise it by making, nasty or trollish comments. So I honestly think that the hostile questioning round that you received is probably an indication that you did really well. Because in fact, like one of my first debates on modern day debate, because I love jumping into the deep end before anything, it was a tag team debate against frickin' Eric Stryker and Mike Enoch. Basically the morning zoo DJs if Hitler had won the war. And I don't even call that a debate on my channel. It's actually like Brent's crazy screaming match with Nazis because that was what it devolved into. But afterwards, I had a number of people from their audience approach me and be like, you seem reasonable. And, hopefully I've played a part in their eventual de-radicalization from this death cult that they had joined. But also, like, people were like, oh my God, I've never seen a modern day debate audience be that hostile towards a debater when they were really coming after me.
Yeah, there's two things that I try to keep in mind when I'm trying to analyze like the chat in debates. One is that the chat is not necessarily a representative sample of the audience, because people who are engaged in the chat, like they are very, very motivated to respond. They are there to not to listen, but to put input. At least I think that's a reasonable assumption you can make it to at least a large majority of the people in chat. Again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of people are that live chat is there, and their primary motivation may be not to listen to the debate, but to input their own opinions.
Yeah. Flag wave for their side. By the way, just right here, we've had a lot of great comments here. That's what got me out of the far right. I don't know what you were saying in response to this, but I'm glad you got out of the far right. And hey, Brent, Addie, her, I'm not quite sure what you're saying there, but I'm happy you're away from the far right. So do you mind if we go in? I'm going to grab a couple of comments out of this, and we can remark on that, and then you can plug your pluggables, because we've been at this for about 50 minutes, and I don't want to take up too much of your incredibly valuable time.
Yeah, incredibly valuable, definitely.
All right. So on the thing of this, by the way, this is so Pog. What the hell? Do you understand what Pog is? I don't.
Pog is good.
Oh, good. All right.
Yeah, like as far as my boomer brain can like conceptualize, Pog means
Pog is good. Excellent. So this is one from frequent commentator and friend of mine, Mustache Bob of the Mustache Mafia podcast, which everyone should check out. There is no alt-right. They're the mainstream of the movement. How do you feel about that? Do you agree?
I feel like it is very, very easy to. So a lot of the research I did on something called system justification theory, which is my best video of all time. It got endorsed by the lead academic author of the theory. You should go check it out. I did a lot of work on it. It is one of the things that we default to is reactionary thinking. When I say reactionary, what I'm primarily looking at simplistic us versus them mentality. So when things get tough, and when I say things get tough, not if you are tired because you've had a long day or you're dealing with 8,000 other things in your life that have nothing to do with politics, it is easier to just know there's good guys, there's bad guys. If you don't agree with me, you're a bad guy. That's all I can deal with right now. That is something that everyone falls into, myself included. But it's useful to recognize that for what it is. Think of your grandma. Think of that aunt that you absolutely love, even though that she has pretty terrible politics. Think about someone that you love in your family who does not agree with your political opinions. It is unproductive and damaging, not just to political discourse, but to you as a person, to essentialize that person into their worst opinions that you've ever found. These are people. If you are a progressive, if you are a leftist, you care about everyone. Or at least you should. And you recognize that systems are enormously impactful for how we form our opinions and our worldviews. It is, in my opinion, not in that mindset of what a leftist should be to essentialize someone to say that you are a morally, diagnostically bad person because you think this certain way. Everyone has reasons. Those reasons are enormously environmentally and socially influenced, and we have to keep that in mind. And so when you say that alt-right that's the mainstream of the movement, it depends on a lot of different factors, like how wide do you cast the net of alt-rights. But you really ought to be a little bit more nuanced than that. There are conservatives who are good people. There are conservatives who have thought about their positions, who, even though we think they are incorrect, who are still good people who want the same goals that we have, which is for people to live the best lives that they possibly can. To lump all of them into morally like genetically bad people is a bad look. And I know a lot of like of course like most of us will say like, oh, genetically bad, that's not a thing that exists. But functionally and practically, if you just say this person is only bad and they have no redemption qualities whatsoever, that's essentially what you're saying. Even if you say it's not due to genetics, you're saying it's due to genetics. So that's kind of my take on that.
Good point. Wow, way to lay the smackdown on Bob. You hear that, Bob? No, that was a beautiful point. I really liked it. So we've got right here. This actually is something that I wanted to address, and I'm glad that they commented on it. We have here from B in the Hive. I love how they claim a private business can do whatever they want unless someone is fired for transphobic, homophobia, or racist remarks and behavior, and then suddenly it's cancel culture. So I'm going to let you respond really quickly, but before you do, so I have worked as a manager. And this Tjump seemed to be particularly worried about this during the debate, and I really wish you'd hit him with this, because the fact is, he's like, you can be fired for being transphobic, which I no, for the most part, that's not going to happen. But here's the thing. Most employment within the United States is at-will employment. And when you sign your employment contract with most employers, unless you are represented by a union, you will essentially be agreeing that you can be fired for any reason or no reason whatsoever. So now there are laws that protect certain people from being fired as a protected class. If a boss comes out and fires a black person and says, I'm firing you because you are black, then you have a civil rights case on your hand. But that exact same boss, and I never did this, but if you wanted to fire someone because they were black, or because they were gay, or because they were trans, or because they were transphobic, you didn't have to say it. All you have to do is lie, or just don't give all the information. You can just
people
say,
vastly over, it is good that we have protected classes. That is a good thing. That is something that we ought to have. But I think a lot of people vastly overestimate the efficacy of such laws. If you are made super uncomfortable by one of your employees, coming out as trans and transitioning genders, if you're made super uncomfortable by that, you don't have to say so. You can keep that to yourself and find reasons. Layoffs, sorry, we had to fire a bunch of people and you just happened to be one of them. Or your numbers weren't doing great. Sorry. It's performance for you just came back bad. You could just lie or omit information. So that's way more difficult to prove because you have to objectively prove bias.
Yeah.
And I don't know a way to fix that because I do think that the burden of proof should be pretty high in that. There are reasons. I've worked with many of people, and their identity didn't seem to have any sort of impact over their efficacy as an employee. I have met people of all backgrounds who were terrible at their jobs, who deserved to be fired, and so that burden of proof should be pretty high, but it's way overestimated, I think, in a lot of the public's eye.
I agree. I think honestly, it's more people want to be able to fire people for having a lifestyle that they disagree with, because that sends a completely different message. Now, here's one, by the way. Jangles crushed Milo.
I appreciate it. I have done a lot of thought about that debate. There are things that I'm proud of. I don't know if I would have done much differently, but criticisms that I've received have been very valid, and I've tried to incorporate them into my approach going forward with mixed success.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think I can let me see if I can grab one more out of here.
Just while you're grabbing that, one quick note: the fear of getting fired for being perceived as bigoted, and bigotry is a wide brush here. I kind of get that. If you care legitimately about fighting racism, fighting homophobia, fighting transphobia, any sort of bigotry that you can think of, it sucks to get called bigoted in any capacity whatsoever. It actually does suck.
Yeah,
that is a blow to your identity. That is a criticism that conflicts with the very core of your values. And sometimes it can be legitimate, in which case doing the personal work to fix it is really, really tough. And I think we could do a better job about especially knowing what we know about systems and how people are products of their environment. I think we can do a little bit better job about facilitating that without more diagnosing a person as wholly bad or bigoted or whatsoever. But I also think that people vastly I think on the other side of that, people are incredibly incurious as to their motivations behind things, and they vastly overstate the ferocity. It's more like they're creating a scenario in their head that they're scared of, and that's what they're arguing against. Well,
which you mentioned during the debate, right? The imaginary person that you hate.
Yeah, creating a person and getting mad about them. So creating a scenario and getting really, really mad about it in a plane that is fairly removed from reality, which it can be fun as a hypothetical, but when you try to say that, no, this is a proxy for reality, you got to provide a little bit of evidence for that.
All right. So what we've got right here, this is the last one, and then we'll have you plug your pluggables. But I remember when I was a kid and every adult was saying not to let kids see The Legend of Billie Jean. I'd never heard of it. If they hadn't said anything, I would not have known it existed. What the hell is The Legend of Billie Jean?
That's the point, isn't it?
Well, now we've got to go look.
I don't know what The Legend of Billie Jean is. What is that? I started to Google it. So
my hand's moving on its own. Makes a lot of sense. All right, so Jangles, I think you were one of the stronger debaters on Modern Day Debate. I think that this particular debate you were very strong in, and you had an uphill battle to fight. So why don't you plug your pluggables? When are we going to see you next? And also, if I'm not mistaken, you put out a really great video on trans women in sports recently.
So hello, everyone. My name is Justin. I go by Jangles Sciencelad on YouTube and SJW Debates on Twitter. I have a mix of video essays and debate content, so I kind of do a little bit of both. You can see me very, very soon. So within a month. So this month in April, I will be going to Better Discourse Conference, which is a very right-wing event. And I'll be speaking in person at a panel about BLM and feminism in the media. So I'll be talking a lot about like media representation.
It's gonna be red meat to those people.
Yeah, I know. And I'm going to be going up against Sydney Watson. So it's a very hostile environment. So I get to put a lot of these ideas to the test, like ingratiating myself with an audience, dealing with a hostile crowd, not just a chat hostile crowd, but an actual, like, they're physically there. So, but there are a lot of like left-wing people who I think are really, really, really intelligent. And we got Riley Grace Rochon. We have LSP, who is really, really controversial, but he's my friend, and I think he's incredibly intelligent.
Wait, LSP, Lumpy Space Princess?
Lumpy Space Princess, yes. Liberal Sanity Project, who has he keeps doing cancelable things on Twitter every other day, but he's my friend. He is very intelligent. And Destiny will be there as well. All of us representing like the left-wing perspective at that event. Last time we crushed it, so I hope we do it again. And so I do a lot of debates, and I also do a lot of video essays. And I have a science background. I have a master's degree in biomechanics. I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology. I've spent 10 years as a personal trainer. I'm a certified strength and conditioning coach. And so I recently put out a video with 75 sources, the vast majority of which were academic peer-reviewed sources, arguing for the legitimacy of trans women participating in the female category of sports, as well. And most of my other video essays are of a similar aim. I have a lot of scientific sources in those essays, and I'd like to think that I do an okay job at presenting real academic research. So
awesome.
If you hate debates, I have alternatives for you.
Absolutely. Everybody check out Jangles. I think he's one of the most talented lefties, and you've got a big, long career ahead of you. So I'm excited to see you continue to go on and continue to own chuds for many, many years.
Well, I appreciate it very much. Like I respect you as a person, so that means something.
Cool. Yeah. So this has been Insurrection with Brenton Lengel. For those of you who are following my comic series, Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, I am about to send out I'm about to fulfill the second Kickstarter. We've got some really, really cool stuff coming, and the third Kickstarter will be launching. I also wanted to announce, and I think, Jangles, you might have mentioned this or seen it beforehand, or somebody else did. I have had my very first script optioned by a production company, which is really exciting. It is a historical biopic about the life and death of Buenaventura Durruti, who is essentially the anarchist Che Guevara, and his battling fascists in Spain. So it's incredible. It's an incredible story. It's a true story. And fun fact, because I am also, there is a crossover coming in the second comic in the series. I'm releasing it also as a comic series. Durruti and his friends were dubbed by the press the Avengers. So they were the real life Avengers before the Avengers actually existed. And now they're making their way into comic and cinematic form. So this would be the real cinematic universe of, I guess, the anarchist cinematic universe. All right. So from me to you with Insurrection Brenton Lengel, everything words, signing off. I will catch you guys on the flip side. And Jack,
have a good night.
Being on the program.